So maybe we can begin at an obvious starting point with how you first came to discover Buddhism and meditation for yourself.
Well, I was studying philosophy at university. And then when I finished that, I joined the American Peace Corps. And I ended up in Thailand. And so I was just teaching English in Bangkok. And I started going to a discussion group that a couple of monks, Buddhist monks, were leading for Westerners. And that really kind of prompted my interest. Of course, I having had studied philosophy, I went to these groups and asked so many questions, of these poor monks, that people stopped coming because I was going. I was so annoying to the group. So finally, one of the monks said, Joseph, why don't you try meditating? I think it was just to get me to be quiet a little bit. So he gave me just the very beginning instruction. I was very young, I was just like 21 years old, first time in Asia, didn't know really anything about Buddhism, or meditation. So he gave me some just basic instructions. I got my, paraphernalia together, sit down, set my alarm clock for 5 minutes, so I didn't sit too long. But something actually quite extraordinary happened. Not any big enlightenment experience, but even in that first 5 minutes, I saw that there was a way to turn the attention to look into the mind as well as looking out through it. And that was revelatory to me. The fact that there actually was a methodology for looking into the mind. And that was it. I was hooked. When I finished the Peace Corps, then I came back to the States and realized I needed a teacher, and then went back to India and then found a teacher and then really devoted myself to the practice.
And when you found a teacher, that was in the Vipassana tradition, am I right, that you've dedicated your teaching career to?
Yeah. So when I went back to India, looking for a teacher. I traveled around a bit, ended up in Bodh Gaya, where I met my first teacher, Munindraji, and he was teaching Vipassana. I didn't know I was looking for Vipassana. I was just looking for some kind of meditative guidance. And I went to a few different ashrams and, trying to just meet different teachers. When I went to Bodh Gaya and met Munindraji, my first teacher, he had just come back from Burma, spending 9 years there. And he was starting to teach Vipassana, and that was it. He said something so simple when I first met him. It really hooked me. He said, if you want to understand your mind, sit down and observe it. I mean, there was nothing to join. There was no ritual. There was no set. It was just that. And it made so much common sense to me. How else can we understand our minds except by observing it? So that was it. I was hooked.
And am I right that before you came across Vipassana, you had a kind of major moment of insight hearing a reading from a Tibetan book, the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation?
I did. Yeah. So while I was still in the Peace Corps, a friend and I, he was actually a British guy who was working for the British Council, teaching at the school that I was teaching. And we had become friends, and I was just hanging out in the garden of his house, and we were both interested in exploring lots of different things. And he started reading from this Tibetan text. It was an old version, which the name of it was in that version was the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation. As I since have come to learn, it's not a very good translation. However, it had this profound effect on me. He was reading it. I was really, for whatever reason, my mind was very, very still and quiet. And just as he was reading the text, which is really a text of instruction for looking directly at the nature of the mind, and then just something opened up that was quite incredible, of a real understanding of selflessness. Which of course is a core Buddhist teaching, but it really came to life for me, in that moment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That I think I have the same translation of that book, and it's the first spiritual text that really resonated with me. And Alan Wallace, I also spoke to, the Dzogchen teacher, he as well was first. That was his first, I think, big aha moment with a religious text, and we've all been reading
I
the
didn't
wrong
know that.
translation, I think.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but I'm
But there were a
interested
few key
in,
words that were
yeah.
I think
Sometimes that's all you
translated
need.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I wonder, I think the audience won't forgive me if I don't try to get you to describe something of what the experience was like, although I'm sure it's very hard to describe. But yeah, could you say something about what happened in your mind at the moment when you heard this text?
Yeah. So a lot of the text was about just looking into the nature of mind. So a lot of the refrain was look within, and look with. So I was just following that instruction, as I was listening, and then it went on to describe, from that Tibetan viewpoint, the nature of the mind as being unformed, uncreated, unborn, and somehow when my friend was just was repeating that, and with the word unborn, it's like something stopped in my mind or opened in my mind. And the way I described it to myself, just after that moment, which was very radical. I mean, it was like a lightning bolt. The image that came to mind was just the experience of zero. Just zero. But that had the function of, and again, all this was new to me. It was completely unexpected. It's not that I had been following a path at that point. It was just kind of a spontaneous happening. From that experience of the mind opening to whatever one likes to call it, the unborn or the uncreated or zero, the function of that experience was to see through the illusion of self, and so I remember, again, this is in a very naive way, because I didn't really have any context for any of this. It was kind of out of the blue. So I remember kind of saying to myself, there's no me. There's no me. So it was that all of a sudden, like, everything changed. And yeah, I don't know if that's
that's great.
Describes much, but
yeah, no, I think also the concept unborn. I think there's this Zen koan of what is the face you had before you were born. That really resonates with me as well.
right.
It seems to precipitate a similar
Yeah,
insight that's kind of wordless. But it's interesting that
yeah,
you
yeah.
found Vipassana to be the tradition that you end up devoting yourself to. And was it the pragmatism you mentioned, that it's just the instruction of just look at your mind? Was that the thing that really resonated?
Well, just a little backstory to that. When I went back to India to look for a teacher, and I realized, after that experience in Thailand, I went back to the States. I had finished my time in the Peace Corps, and I tried to practice by myself, but I really hadn't had any, very extensive instruction. So I was just mixing up a lot of things I was doing, mantras and third eye and whatever, whatever I had heard about meditation. I got very confused, and so that's when I realized I needed a teacher. So I went back to Asia, to India, and I actually went looking for some Tibetan teachers, since that had happened through a Tibetan text. But for whatever reason, karmic or otherwise, I went up to the mountains where I thought the Tibetans were staying, but they had all gone south. And so I was traveling around to different ashrams, and I ended up in Bodh Gaya. And it was when I met Muninja and he described the practice, it was the simplicity and the pragmatism and the lack of, I don't know what the right word is, the lack of a lot of extra stuff. It was just this direct look at, just look at your mind. So it seemed to reflect very much my experience and what I was looking for. Okay, so there was this kind of transformative moment, but then what do I do with that? And how do I understand it further? And so it just made a lot of sense to me. The clarity of it and the simplicity of it, and the directness of it.
Yeah. It's very interesting what it is that leads to these different traditions resonating with different people, I think, because as you were describing the lack of extra stuff, it reminded me of a talk I heard from Ram Dass, who I think you spent some time studying with, well, not studying under him, but knowing him. And
we were friends in Bodh Gaya.
Right. And he was saying, he was coming from this kind of psychological training, and Buddhism intellectually really appealed. But then for whatever reason, the kind of Hindu tradition just kind of grabbed him and took him over. And he said he thought he didn't like all the gods and all the extra paraphernalia. But it's just interesting. I guess we're kind of lucky to have so many different traditions, in a sort of perennial way. They can all lead to the same place, but whatever, you can have whatever resonates with you.
Ram Dass, he had that strong bhakti devotional side that needed expression, which he found with his guru. Yeah.